If you have ever owned a slave, please raise your hand. Slavery is not our fault. We didn't do it. We didn't cause it, but it is our shared history.
Slavery had nothing to do with the war.
And so if I make the statement to you, America was founded on white supremacy.
Lynchings or hangings took place here.
It's a genocide, it's an ethnic cleansing.
The bodies were dumped all the way where the underpass is, and they intentionally put the interstate on top of their bodies.
It's ingrained in my memory. I'm just looking at him in the ditch with his eyes open.
My daddy sat on the carport right here in a lawn chair with a shotgun across his lap because he was going to be ready if somebody came to the house.
There must be a revolution of values in our country.
I cannot look at that video in its entirety.
And my brother did not deserve to die unarmed with his hands in the air.
It will never get easier to have an honest discussion about race in America than it is right now, because if we wait, it is only going to get harder.
Well, anyway, hi everybody. Everybody looks fantastic. The light is fantastic. Oh, I was just telling the Kunstlers that my neighbor is a Bard student who is practicing her opera trill. So if some of that leaks through, I apologize. But it could be a worse noise.
Yes, it could be. So, and
I hear it. It's good. It's fine. When she first moved here, she actually left me a note. Is there a good time for me to do this and convenient for your schedule? So how can you get upset with somebody who does that?
Yeah,
That's a good neighbor.
He's a very good tactician. That was a great move.
Yeah. Well, it's really great to meet you, Jeffrey, and to see Emily and Sarah. I haven't seen them in a long time. Although I will mention that 7 or 8 years ago, I think, I know I screened Disturbing the Universe at a little film series that I ran in Brooklyn, and it kind of reconnected us from our distant past. But it's great that we're all reconnected. I definitely, when I saw that you had a new film, you were coming on anyway. So the fact that it turned out to be, Who We Are, a Chronicle of Racism in America, is only cream on the, whipped cream or whatever you call it, strawberry on the cake. And it's just such an amazing and powerful film. So I was really so happy to see it. And I worried as I watched it that I wouldn't know how to talk about it because there's so much, So I will just first ask this, Jeffrey, we'll start with you. And that is, this is obviously a talk you've been taking around the country for a while, right? And so can you talk about how you developed it? Because it's sort of the structure, it's the framework of the film.
In about 2011, my wife's younger sister passed away, and she was a single mom in Queens, New York. And her son, now our son, was 13. She died in April, and her mother, my wife's mother as well, died in November, and those were the two women raising Matthew. So he moved from Queens to Seattle, and my wife and I didn't have kids, and now this young Black man was in our home, and all the things that I was working on in my practice as a criminal defense lawyer, where I had been focusing on issues of racial justice and thought I was, near the edge of pushing those issues, and all of a sudden all that didn't make any sense anymore because this kid is in my house, and I was terrified and I didn't know quite what to do. And so I started reading, and I don't even know what I was looking for, but what I found started to really shape me. I was born in 1956 in Memphis, Tennessee. So I didn't grow up reading about the civil rights movement. I was living it when I walked out of my house. My older brother and I integrated a Catholic school in Memphis in 1963, and there's something in the film about that. I've had one of the best educations in America, Marquette University and Harvard Law School. So I thought I knew our history of racism in America, and I discovered that I didn't know anywhere near what I needed to know. And as I found more and more information, my training as a criminal defense lawyer had always guided me to take any complex set of facts and put them in a timeline before you start trying to understand them. And when I did that, this presentation was born. And once I got over being angry at myself and beating myself up for not knowing this information, I then decided I would blame it on my teachers so I could get angry at them. And then I figured, well, if nobody taught them, how were they going to teach me? And once I stopped trying to figure out who I was going to be angry at, I decided, well, I wonder how many other people don't know this. And that's how the presentation came about.
Can you describe or give an example of one of those things that you didn't know about that you learned during the process of this? Because it seems like, given your background, your work with the ACLU, et cetera, that you would be the exact guy who would know those things. And
I had never heard.
You come from an African-American experience. How do you not know?
I had never heard of the Colonial Marines. I had no idea what impact they had on Francis Scott Key and on the national anthem. And when I first read about the third verse of the national anthem, I read it in a place, a blog from someone who was fairly radical. And I thought, this is an exaggeration. So I went and got the original document, because you can go and see it. The handwritten document by Francis Scott Key, where he wrote the poem that is now the national anthem. And if you go to the third verse, it is celebrating the murder of enslaved people, saying, how dare you fight against America? We're going to hunt you down and put you in the dirt. And my head was spinning. I thought, I've been fooled about what that entire thing was about. And not the only thing it was about, because, you know, he had watched 25 consecutive hours of the bombing of Fort McHenry, and the American flag was still waving. So that wasn't the only thing it was about, but it was important enough to him to put it in the freaking poem.
Yeah. As you mentioned, he was himself a slave owner. Is that?
He was, and a virulent white supremacist and racist. And one of the interesting things, you know, we did the presentation that is the backbone of this film. Sarah and Emily filmed this in 2018. And then we've been going around the country since then. So there are things that we sort of talked about that have manifested themselves in different ways as we've gone forward over the years. And I think that's another interesting way to look at the film.
Sarah, how did your roads converge?
I am a criminal defense lawyer practicing in New York. And I went to a continuing legal education seminar, which I'm required to do to keep my license current. And Jeff was the speaker. And normally I place very little stock in these. These are the kind of events where you, to be quite honest, you bring your laptop, you find the available Wi-Fi, and you sit there for the time period you're required to sit there, and then you get your certificate without any information transferring from the speaker to you. And this was a singular experience in my life where I could not stop watching. And I could not, stop taking notes. I just wanted to absorb completely the history that Jeff was sharing. And when I walked out of there, the first thing I did was call my sister, Emily, and say, we have to film this. We have to bottle this. We have to take this history that Jeffrey has distilled and help it reach a larger audience.
Emily, were you looking for a project already? Because it's been a few years since Disturbing the Universe.
I've never heard the answer to this question, so I'm really interested.
Well, I mean, the majority of the work that we do are smaller films, or advocacy films for people in prison. And there's really never a shortage of that kind of work. In terms of a larger
project, was brought up in the film, by the way. I'm just sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
In terms of looking for a larger project, I'm always very wary, because it's a big investment, of time and energy and resources to take on a new documentary. So Sarah told me about this. It sounded like an amazing project. I wanted to know more. And after I got to see, there was some part of the presentation, but not the whole thing. I believed in what this project was and knew we had to do something. So it's not that we were looking for something found us that we couldn't say no to. So we teamed up with Jeffrey, and the rest is history.
Well, I'm so glad it did. I'm going to push everybody to see the documentary, to see the film. It really is essential viewing. I will say that for right in this moment in time, especially because I was thinking of a couple of things. One is like there's this phenomenon in psychotherapy, and I know from personal experience, but where you as a patient, as you get really close to some truths, it gets scary as hell. And a lot of people will often find themselves fleeing, like leaving therapy even, because they're on the verge of something that might be difficult. It will alter your life. It'll mean yourself dedicating yourself possibly to a new way of thinking and living. And I kind of feel as a country, that's where we're scared of just taking that extra step. When it's, to those who already have, it's sort of a liberating thing. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I felt that way. That first occurred to me, Jeffrey, when you were talking to, and I know you credited him at the end, but I don't remember. But the gentleman I think it was in Memphis, in front of the statue protesting, it's being saved, right? Because a lot of this, those
in South Carolina.
Say again?
He was in South Carolina.
South Carolina, excuse me. So a lot of their obviously Confederate statues are under the threat of being removed. So your exchange there really kind of, where this guy, as you said afterwards, like he knew, it just wasn't like this doesn't, he knew he's too smart not to know that there's no logic to what he was talking, and there was no sense to it, but it's just taking that extra leap of,
It's the power of the status quo is amazing. And I do think it's important to realize that when you're asking people to challenge a worldview that they've held most of their lives, you're asking a lot, but we just don't have any other choice.
Yeah. Speaking of the statues, I noticed I also came into contact recently with Tammy Sawyer through another project. She was on this podcast recently, and I got to meet her, and she was fantastic. And there's also a very powerful segment in the film, late into the film, where, and that's back in Memphis, if I'm not incorrect. Yes, it is, because she's a commissioner there in Memphis. And where also she talks about how much it took to just remove some of the statues there. Jeffrey, did you find this experience? Are you still giving the talk, first of all? Are you still traveling with this talk?
I am. The last time I gave the talk was Wednesday of this week. And if you saw it, you would recognize some of the things from the talk in 2018, but it has changed radically. And I think I can honestly say that I have never may be an exaggeration, not more than once or twice have I given the exact same talk more than one time, because things continue to change. And one of the things I got from a week and a half ago from an AP history class in Florida was a white teacher telling Black kids that when I call you the N-word, I'm not saying anything about your race, I'm just saying something about your intelligence. And then telling those same people that enslaved people were not whipped by white people during the period of slavery in America. And the concept that these myths and these kind of views that we can look at in isolation and say, oh my God, that's bizarre. Nobody's believed that for 100 years. This stuff isn't old. These problems aren't old. They are contemporary and right here for everybody to see. So the talk continues to change, and it will, because America continues to give examples of what we're talking about.
I guess this goes back to the Kunstlers. How did you decide, like, which? Because as we said, the talk is sort of provides the structure, or the infrastructure of the film. Let's say we keep going back to this talk that you say was from 2018, and then throughout we also have segments with all sorts of folks who testimonials, essentially, right, from people who have dealt with racism in their lives in a very personal way. How did you decide where to go? Because there's so many different parts of that story,
A lot of decisions were made by the people that we found along the way. We decided to travel with Jeffrey as he gave this presentation across the country, and wherever we went, we would try to find local historians or people with personal life experiences that could bring alive parts of Jeffrey's presentation. But like all documentaries, luck and chance plays a big part.
Right.
We were lucky enough to meet some amazing people that seem to have been born right out of Jeffrey's presentation in a lot of ways. They spoke directly to a lot of the issues that he was addressing. So that's really, it was because we were able to find these amazing people along the way. We incorporated their stories.
Well, again, the name of the documentary is Who We Are, Chronicle of Racism in America. It's having its world premiere this coming next week. This Tuesday starts South by Southwest. It's in the documentary spotlight category, I believe. And let's see, what was I going to ask you, Sarah? I know what I was going to say. I mean, there's, first of all, like Jeffrey experienced, I certainly experienced my share of mind-blowing things I had no idea about. Like, one is, my example would be in New York City, that they were talking, the mayor of New York City back in, remind me of the year, Jeffrey.
1861.
1861, the first year of the Civil War, correct? Or I think so. Yeah. Anyway, so he was talking about New York kind of seceding, like for financial reasons. Like, why? Just because the South, we don't have to do what they're doing. We can also secede and become, sort of benefit from the economy of slavery. And so that was something that I learned. I wasn't aware of that, particular moment in time. Sarah, did you? Obviously, you come from a background where civil rights is an enormous component. So I'm just wondering if you learned anything during this process of making the documentary.
I learned all the way through. I learned sitting in that room, listening to Jeff's talk.
First time, yeah.
I learned as we met people along the way. I don't think, you can identify as an anti-racist. You can commit yourself to doing anti-racist work, and at the same time, you can be ignorant a lot of our history of racism and white supremacy.
Yeah.
Right? All of those things can be true and are true. And I think we're coming to a point where we're starting to take a look at a lot chronologically, right? There's a generosity required to start at the beginning and go and a patience and go all the way to the end and say, and to enable yourself to have the realization, this is how we got here, right? You can't isolate a moment of time in the history of the white experience or the Black experience of this country and understand it, right? This film, Jeffrey's talk, enables us to begin to do that. And that was, and knowing that has implications, right? It is a charge to action. It is it gives you a responsibility to do more, to do better, to share the information, to educate others. And that was my experience of seeing Jeffrey for the first time. And that is what we hope the film will do.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I look forward to sharing this film with a lot of people. It really had an incredible impact. Some of the most, of course, on a personal level, like Jeffrey, when you reunited with your old school chums, very, very personal moment. There's lots of moments where you look like you're ready to like start weeping. That moment, you didn't hold back, actually. But I mean, you look very emotionally raw during a lot of those moments in the film throughout. They're very personal for you, to say the least, right?
This was not easy. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. And I think the the most rewarding and the most difficult trip for me personally was the trip to Memphis, because it was my home and
Sure.
and my family, and I still have family there. And so what I will say about the Oriens family in Memphis, an Irish Catholic family that had 9 kids. One, Opie, who was my best friend growing up in grade school, and his older brother, Dick, who was, our kind of coach and mentor. They had absolutely no reason to treat me in the way that they did, especially at that time in Memphis. And what I see that part of the story being is an example of what could have been around the country. And I wonder where we would be as a country if that kind of acceptance and that kind of community existed across racial lines going forward. And that was unfortunately a moment in time that didn't last. But my wife always jokes that for decades she has heard about my grade school buddy Opie, and now finally gets to understand who he is. But
Yeah.
it was a hard experience, and I think it was hard for Sarah and Emily. I just remember the drive from Joe Bowling's house back to the Atlanta airport. There were, I don't know what, 10 of us in that van, however many. And I don't think there were 10 words said during the entire drive. It was just literally complete silence, because I think all of us were overwhelmed. Do y'all remember that?
I mean, this is an incredibly personal experience. We were in a 10 to 15 passenger van together, driving around, going to hear Jeff's speech, listening to people share wrenching moments of their past and wrenching moments in our history together. And it was a very bonding experience for all of us. We we were on a group history lesson.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'll just say, one of the people we met, a young man who helped us film in Tulsa, Oklahoma, then decided to take his entire family, his wife and his children, during the pandemic on a quote unquote vacation. And they went to every city where we filmed. And they got drone footage for us. And some of that footage is part of what makes this film so beautiful. But, this young man heard the talk, decided I've got to know more, and now his children have an understanding of American history that is probably, unfortunately, somewhat unique for kids their age around this country. But that's what this film did to those of us who were involved with it.
It's called Who We Are, Chronicle of Racism in America. It's co-directed by Emily and Sarah Kunstler, written by Jeffery Robinson, produced by all three, and cinematography by a friend of mine, Jesse Wakeman, who's done this podcast in the past. I did not know that was your DP, so it was an interesting surprise. But it's again, it's going to have.
And just to show you that there's less than 6 degrees of separation, Jesse is the son-in-law of a woman that I met in 1974 at Marquette University my freshman year, and who has been one of my closest friends my entire life. So there is a definite bonding and family experience that came from this.
We're as connected as we want to be.
Oh, also, Jeff, you should talk about the Who We Are project. Which you didn't to say it.
Yeah. Oh wait, there's a podcast. Yes, as good as I am.
Well, the podcast, but also even bigger than that.
Bigger.
This film is just the tip of the iceberg for the work that Jeffrey's launching into right now. So it'd be great for him to talk about that.
Yeah.
So Emily, you go, and I'll in my head put together the 4 sentences that I want.
I'm not sure what it is. Is there something in particular you wanted me to say, Sarah? I guess I would just say that this working with Jeff and getting an opportunity to make this film with him was really a gift for Sarah and I. You know, it was sort of the opportunity of a lifetime to meet Jeff, to gain his trust, for him to trust us in taking his words and his message to a larger audience. It was a great 3 years, and we enjoyed every minute of it, and we couldn't be prouder of the end product.
And I will just echo that and say that it was a significant leap for me to trust these 2 women, but they demonstrated who they were at every turn. And it's easy to trust people who basically are showing you who they are as opposed to telling you who they are. And the film is, I never dreamed of doing this. So just the fact that it is created, the fact that it's at a film festival, I'm just laughing about this. I never had this intent, but it's an important thing, and it is a part of something bigger, something called the Who We Are Project. I did this film with Sarah and Emily. You know, Sarah is a full-time lawyer. Emily is doing these other films. I had a job at the ACLU. On April 1st, I'm leaving the ACLU, and I start full-time as I haven't decided if I'm calling myself executive director or poobah or whatever the title is, of the Who We Are Project. And that project, the film is an asset of the project. The presentation I give that lasts 3 hours, and which is different from the film, is an asset of the project. The project has the goal of changing the narrative on our history of race and white supremacy in America, and having a major impact on it in the next 5 years. And there are 3 buckets we're going to work on. One is schools, one is the community at large, and one is government and corporate organizations. So you will be seeing and hearing more of the Who We Are Project, and that's thewhoweareproject.org.
Well done.
Thank you for reminding me about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Start doing that.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to kind of work through these things here live on my show. Not live, but on the show. I'm only happy to provide that platform for you guys. Thank you for bringing that up. We should probably led with that, or I should have probably led with that, but
no biggie.
I'll get on that mailing list right now. I want to hold on to the message and the power of the film as long as I can, and the greater message behind it. Thank you all.
Thanks again.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Okay.